So Planet Earth 2 was the series that came out in 2016. Now this series was advertised as a sequel to Planet Earth and basically set the trend of making sequels to a lot of other more popular series. That wasn't how it started out originally. This was originally envisioned as being called One Planet. However, the good folks at the BBC realised that it was 10 years since their most profitable and most popular series had been produced, so they thought, why not capitalise on that, let's make this Planet Earth 2, and to be fair to them, it raked in quite a lot of viewers. After Planet Earth, this was their most popular series. In fact, it might have even surpassed it, to be honest. But this series is pretty good. I don't know about, it doesn't feel like a direct sequel a lot of the time to Planet Earth. For instance, two of the episodes aren't like follow-ups to previous episodes, four of them are. This first episode is called Islands. Now, islands were a habitat that were not visited in Planet Earth, but this episode opens up with pygmy sloths, which are an island species of three-toed sloth, which, like a lot of island species, are dwarfs. This is basically an example of island dwarfism, where species that might be larger on the mainland are smaller on islands, because they don't need to be as big. And then we see this sloth basically looking for a mate. We hear one sloth calling, and he goes off to find her, and because these islands are sort of scattered around and there's very few pygmy sloths and they're all kind of dotted about here, there and everywhere, this sloth has to swim, and it's quite a good sequence. I remember it being very iconic at the time. It was very good in the trailer, and the trailer for the series, it was actually great. It probably was the best trailer for a BBC natural history series, and the music as well, actually great. The music in this series is fantastic. It is almost a bit similar, weirdly I didn't realise this till years later, that the main theme of this is similar to the main theme of the film Carol, which starred Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara, which came out in 2015. I don't know if this inspired Hans Zimmer or not, but it feels quite it's very strange. It was a very strange experience watching that film after having seen this series years prior. But anyway, the sloth sequence is really good. It's a nice comedic sequence, but it's also impressive. It's a good bit of filmmaking. It's got a good bit of music. It's quite funny, and it's it's a nice little, you get behind the sloth. From there we move on to Komodo, where we see the Komodo dragons. Now, having an episode about islands and not dealing with Komodo dragons would probably be sacrilege. I mean, they probably, apart from Galapagos giant tortoises, the most famous island inhabitants, I think. But this is good. The filmmaking here is great. I mean, the sequences of the Komodo dragons just walking up the beach are great. But to be fair, we don't really see them do anything we haven't seen before. They see them fighting, we see them hunting. It's good, but it's not like anything miraculous, I don't think. Nothing I hadn't seen before. I think the best sequence for Komodo dragons will always be in the series Life. From there we move on to Madagascar, where we see lemurs. Again, similarly to the Komodo dragon sequence, it feels like a bit of a showcase of, here's Madagascar, here's lemurs, aren't they cool? We do see lemurs later in the series, but this episode I kind of feel just is like oh, here's lemurs, it's good. You get a bit of time with Shafakas, but not a huge amount of time, I don't think. From there we move on to the Galapagos. This is where we get the best part of this episode, and probably the best part of the series, and that is the marine iguanas. So the marine iguanas, we spend a bit of time with the marine iguanas, we see them foraging, we see them feeding, but then we see where they lay their eggs in the sand. So in their young hatch, they have to basically find their way to the colonies, find their way out of the sand to the rocks where they're safe. Now you go into this, you think, okay, they're probably fine, what predators are going to be, some birds or something, and then we see the little iguana hatchling wandering through the sand, and then we see a snake, a racer snake pops up, and then another racer snake pops up, and then another one, and then all these racer snakes just slither out of the rocks, and it's a really good sequence. The way they filmed it, I remember at the time being absolutely just gobsmacked by it. It was a brilliant, I think most people were. I remember listening to Radio 2 the next morning and Chris Evans talking about it, like it really had gone everywhere. But these racer snakes just came out everywhere, and it was like almost like a horror sequence. The way they filmed it was amazing. Then after this you get this really high octane chase of these snakes chasing the marine iguanas. Some of them get caught, there's a lot of close-ups of the iguanas getting captured by the snakes and obviously getting killed. And then you see this one hatchling that we kind of follow for the rest of the sequence, and you're basically on its side as it evades all these snakes. They're all coming out the rocks. Some of them are ambushing them, some of them are chasing them, some have to stop and stay still sometimes. Sometimes the close-ups, the snakes just slithering past the iguana's head as it's in the sand. Brilliant stuff. The whole sequence was the perfect balance of action to genuine, almost horror, to be honest. It was really good. Of course, that marine iguana escapes, but it's such a good sequence, honestly. I can't really do it justice. It's just such a brilliant part of the episode. To be honest, it's the high point of the episode. The episode never really gets as good as that, and to be honest, from what I remember, the series never does. But from there, we then move on to these albatross in New Zealand, and it's fine. It's not as nothing in this episode is as good as the racer snakes and the iguanas, to be honest. It's basically just watching this male waiting its mate appearing, and then they reunite. And we've seen that before. I think series like Trails of Life or Life Story did that sequence better. From there, then we go into the Seychelles, I think it is, where we see a lot of birds. They're nesting, but there's also some sinister stuff going on. There's little finches that peck at their eggs. There's another species, I think noddies they were called. The trees they nest in, they produce these seeds which are really sticky, and their fledglings are getting covered in the seeds, and they're just basically dying. They starve. They can't get off the island. It's very bleak. It is almost refreshing to see. Not that it's a very refreshing sequence, by the way. It's almost refreshing to see some sort of danger that nature encounters that isn't as a result of humans, because I feel like that's something that's lost in later series. I think we tend to portray the natural world as this perfect, harmonious thing that we've kind of intruded on and we're destroying. That's not really the case, but it's still a good sequence. It's pretty bleak, but in that way it's still portraying the natural world, so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And then we move on to Christmas Island, I believe it was, where we see the red crabs. The red crab migration is kind of famous. I mean, they talk about in the episode how it's done a lot for tourism to the island. And it's a good sequence, but we see how there's ants that have been brought in by humans that are attacking the crabs, they're spraying acid in their eyes, they're feeding on them, and it's quite bleak as well. And they do go into how humans bring things to islands, and that causes mass extinctions across islands. 80% of the species that have gone extinct up to that point certainly were island species, and that is kind of renowned across the world, that most island species are already endangered just because there's not many of them, because they only live on like one island. Having those two sequences, the one with the birds and the Seychelles and the crabs, back to back, it's almost like, it's a bit depressing, I think, because both are quite bleak sequences. Maybe having one in another part of the episode and one in a different part, like splitting them up. Maybe having the albatross in the middle would have worked, to be honest. I just think it's having them together, it's almost too bleak. Still, it's still good, it's just not, doesn't leave you feeling great. And then the last major sequence is the penguins on the island. I'm not even going to try and pronounce because I've already tried 3 times and it's not happening. But it's in Antarctica, and it's the largest penguin colony in the world. It's on this volcano. It's really hard to get to. The reason they'll nest there realistically is to evade predators. That being said, I did see quite a few skuas and giant petrels there, so I don't know about that. I guess leopard seals aren't getting there anytime soon. But still, seeing the penguins go to the sea is pretty harrowing stuff. It's pretty bleak. Like, again, not depressing, but it's quite a lot. Like, you see how you really get a picture of how difficult life is for penguins, because penguins sort of lend themselves to more humorous stuff. Like, they're funny, they look funny, they walk funny, they sort of just are little kind of charismatic birds. But they do live in like some of the hardiest places in the world. Like, they do live quite harsh lives. I think this episode did a really good job of that. Like, you see the penguins coming back, like they're just basically crawling over corpses of other penguins, and they're covered in blood. Some of them have got broken legs. Like, some of them are just getting tossed around in the sea. Like, it really is pretty bleak stuff. But obviously, the penguins we follow get back to their mates, and it's a nice little way to end. So the last part of the episode is the behind the scenes, where we see the people who filmed the penguins. So they go the island where the penguins are, and they're ferried by the same guy who does a lot of these programs. He seems to be the go-to guy to get people into the Antarctic. He's done stuff in Life, Frozen Planet 2 here. And seeing them on the island is really good. Them getting to the island, for one thing, is pretty difficult. It's quite a difficult place to get to. You really see how difficult living in there is. Like, there's the weather, there's obviously the smell from the penguins defecating on their stuff, which is admittedly funny. Even being in this shadow of this volcano was pretty horrific, so you really get a sense that it was really difficult filming this, which then adds to them empathising with the penguins, which are obviously in this really difficult position as well. So yeah, it's a really good way to end the episode. So yeah, overall this episode is good. It's a good way to start the series. The iguanas and the racer snakes is brilliant, like it's the best part of the episode. The rest of it's a bit weird. Like, the penguins are really good, the sloths are pretty good. The stuff at the start, the Komodo dragons and the lemurs and everything, feels a bit like just a showcase islands. Like, they didn't really know, they had no particular focus in mind with regards to behaviour. It was just like showing you that they live there. And the stuff with the birds and the crabs, while good in their own right, having them back to back is a bit too depressing, I think. But it's still good. It's still a good episode. It's probably one of the weaker ones in this series, I think, from what I remember. But it's still good stuff. Overall, yeah, this episode's pretty good. What did you think of it? Like, what were your highlights? I mean, I say what was your highlight. I know what your highlight was. It was the racer snakes and the marine iguanas, because It just is. But right, what's your second favourite bit of the episode? So yeah, what did you think of it? Did you like this? How did you feel this compares within the series? And yeah, let me know what you think. Likewise, also, if you want to see more stuff, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. You don't have to if you don't want to, but the option's there. So yeah, I'll be doing the mountains episode next, and yeah, see you then, and goodbye.